afternoon, everybody. My name is Kasia Jakimowicz, and I will be moderating this session. I would like to welcome you to today's session on European data market and its demand side. So first, I would like to introduce our keynote speakers. First, Giorgio Micheletti from IDC. He is responsible for EU data market study, and Juan Mateos-Garcia from Nesta, who is working around the impacts of big data and analytics on innovation and growth. Very briefly about organizational details. You are all in mute mode right now to high quality of presentation of speakers. During the whole session, you can post questions and raise hands. You can post questions using the question sign, or raise hands using the hand sign, and then all the questions will be addressed during the Q&A session. You can also follow us on Twitter using hashtag EU Data Landscape. And one more thing, you can download the presentations. They are actually available in handouts right now, and they are also available on our site, Data Landscape EU, in blog post about this webinar. So let me start right now, and I'm going to give the voice to Giorgio Micheletti first.
Thank you, Kasia. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Giorgio.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just putting the presentation on. So thank you and good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you, Kasia, and thank you to Open Evidence for organizing this webinar. My name is Giorgio Micheletti. I'm Consulting Manager of IDC, International Data Corporation, and together with Open Evidence, we are conducting this study for the DG Connect of the European Commission. So I'm actually changing to my next slide. Just a few words on this project, and then I will dive in and speaking about the data users a bit more in detail, and then after a few minutes I will leave and pass on my voice to Juan, who will also provide his own perspective on data users and the so-called data wars. So the European Data Market Study is an ongoing engagement with the DG Connect of the European Commission. It started in the beginning of 2014 and it will actually go on until the end of next year. The main goal of this project is to define, assess and measure the European data economy. So we are confronted here with a rather new phenomenon. So we had to carry out a quite significant effort in terms of definitions. But the project itself has three main objectives, as it is portrayed in the slides that I hope everyone is seeing on the screen right now. The principal objective was and is a development and implementation of a so-called European data market monitoring tool, and I'm going to explain in a few minutes what this is. This was accompanied by and is accompanied by a second objective whose aim is to provide a more qualitative view of the so-called data market. And then there is a third objective where Open Evidence is directly involved. We consist of the development of the stakeholder community, so it consists of communications and disseminations activities of all the results that we are finding in this study. If you move to the next slide, you'll see that what I meant for a European data market monitoring tool in the so-called objective A, so in the principal objective of this study. This is the so-called quantitative part of this study. What we've done is a first run of measurements of the data market and the data economy in Europe along a series of different indicators, and what you can see here are the main areas of these indicators. We call indicator 1, indicator 2, indicator 3, knowing that in reality, when you look at the reports that we come out with so far, you will have more indicators and a series of sub-indicators. We have apprehended the phenomenon of the data market and the data economy in Europe, as we said, along different angles. The angle we are going to explain and introduce to you today is the angle of the data, more specifically the angle of the data users. So who are the companies who are using data in a strategic and innovative way? And that's under the umbrella, let's say, of the indicator 2. That said, the whole process revolves around what we've indicated here under indicator 4, so the concept of the data market. And I've included a slide here, the next slide, where I wanted to provide you with some clarifications of what the data market is. Because the data market is not the technology itself, and it's not the overall economy itself. So the data market is the actual place where the digital products and services are exchanged in order to generate innovations and improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the companies, of the economy within in Europe. But this is different to say that the data. So in other words, the data market is not the simple technologies, the big data technologies, or the analytics technologies that are designed to extract value from the data. And at the same time, the data market is not indicated here as the data economy itself. So it's not the sum of the direct impacts, indirect impacts, and induced impacts that the data and data technologies and innovations is producing in the overall economy. That said, if I move to the next slide, I'm going to introduce, as I said, and to speak about a bit more directly on let's say, the main protagonists, or the companies who are producing or using the data. We have, in fact, distinguished in our research 2 main categories of companies: the data suppliers, so the companies who are actually representing the supply side of the data market and the data economy, those companies who are directly involved in the production and delivery of digital and data-related products and services. But we have also the data users, and this is where we are going to focus today. These are companies that are clearly putting a lot of reliance on data to achieve their goals, and in this respect, they clearly represent most and the most innovative business models in Europe. The graphic that is portrayed in this slide shows how it gives you already, before talking about the numbers, but this slide shows you the difference in size of the 2 phenomena. The supply side of the data companies is directly linked to 2 specific sectors of the economy. We have indicated here the ICT and professional services industry. So the basis on which these data suppliers are taken is a rather limited and concentrated base of 1.7 million companies throughout the European Union today. On the other hand, the demand, so the data users, the companies who are relying on data to achieve their goals and not producing directly the digital and data-related products and services, are to be found in the overall economy, in the overall sector. So it's clearly taken from a much larger basis, and they are clearly to be found in we've indicated here 10.2 million companies. They represent, if we look at the numbers now, they represent 6. Their penetration rate is 6.3% in 2014, according to our estimates, whereas the penetrations of the data companies of the supplier side is clearly higher. It's more than the double. If we move to the next slide, I'm going to, if you move to the next slide, we show and we see the distribution of these data users across the different member states. So we said our estimates lead us to a number of 642,000 data users in 2014 across the 28 member states of the European Union. And in the three pie charts that are portrayed in this slide, we have in the first, on the top left-hand pie chart, the distribution by member states. But we've also indicated the distribution of total private companies by member states and the distribution of ICT spending by member states, because this gives us some interesting food for thought. The sheer distributions of data users shows that there is a strict correlations between the size of the countries and the member states themselves. Of course, data users are more numerous in the UK, in Germany, Italy, Spain, and France. However, this seems to be directly linked more to the level of ICT spending. If we see the pie chart at the bottom of this slide, than to the distribution of the overall number of companies per se. This is partly to be explained by the fact that data users are relying more on data technologies, and therefore they are more reliant on the dynamics of the ICT spending per se, and not on the distributions and the size of the overall number of companies present in the countries themselves. If I move to the next slide, we are going to look at the same picture, but not from the member state perspective, but from the industry perspective. So, if just a second, I'm checking. So if we look at the of where these demand of data is to be found, where these data users are more present, we see, not surprisingly, that they are more present in financial services, utilities, and information and communications industries, which means industries that have usually a high penetration rate of ICT spending, which again, not surprisingly. If we considered, as we said at the beginning, that the average penetration rate of data users according to our study is of 6.3%, and if we look on the right-hand side here, the penetration rate of data users accompanied by industries, we see most of the industries lie above the average, and some of these industries are actually below this average. This is the case of healthcare, constructions, and retail and wholesale. Now, in the case of constructions, this is easy to understand. This is an industry that traditionally does not recur to a high level of IT spending, but this is more surprising when we look at a specific industry like healthcare, for example, because healthcare is, on the contrary, an industry that, especially over the past 10 years, has been relying on IT, but it is also an industry that is witnessing some sort of barriers and hindrances when it comes to the distributions of data technologies due to difficulties in investing in innovations, and particularly to the problem of data protections and high sensitivities when it comes to data protections. So this is partly explaining the still low intensity of data users in this industry. If we move to the following slide, we'll look a bit more at the way of the use of technologies that these data users have shown, according to our study in Europe, and the types of data that they are using. So we have carried out, among other things, we have carried out a survey across a representative sample of data users in Europe. And if we look at the left-hand side, we can see that more innovative technologies and data-related technologies like Hadoop are still relatively lagging behind. I mean, the number of people that they're saying that they are aware is relatively high, but when it comes to the planning in the next 12 months of introducing and adopting these technologies, and even more the number of respondents that are actually saying that they are using these technologies, this is still quite low. This leads us to the indications that this leads us to the conclusions of the fact that it's probably more an incremental innovations rather than a disruptive innovations. Also, if we look at the type of data that are used, again, on the right-hand side, and the data users in Europe tend to definitely use structured transactional data, which is the classic data they are used and exchanged over the past few years. But data like coming from mobile device, geographical spatial data, rich media data, these are more in data that they are coming from more innovative business cases. These are still low or relatively low in adoptions. And again, this leads us to the conclusions or to the arguments that the overall innovations in use by data users is more of an incremental nature than of a disruptive nature. So looking at and I'm almost finished, I wanted to close this short presentation by providing you with a snapshot of our estimates, not only regarding the present, regarding 2014, but also regarding data users over the next 5 years, so in 2020. To do so, we've done this exercise not only with data users, of course, but along across the whole panoply of different indicators that we have calculated in this study. But when it comes to the forecasting the numbers into 2020, we have devised 3 alternative and different scenarios. We have considered a baseline scenario, a more positive scenario, which we've called a high growth scenario, and we have also considered a more difficult scenario that we have named challenged scenario. The baseline scenario is characterized by a continuation of positive moderate growth that we have seen more or less throughout the current year. So the macroeconomic picture will not change substantially. Will continue to moderately growth, and innovation will continue to spread across Europe. If we look at the high growth scenarios, in this case, the overall macroeconomic picture will also continue to be moderately positive, but this scenario does not imply huge changes and huge improvement in the macroeconomic sector, because we don't see them to be realistic. But on the other hand, consider a stronger driving role of digital innovation. On the other side of the spectrum, the challenge scenario considers a worsening of the macroeconomic context, which is obviously, unfortunately, possible, coupled with a worsening of the framework conditions and then the slower diffusions of digital innovation. So that's the worst, clearly the worst case. So what are our results in the presence of these three scenarios. This is indicated in my last slide and the next slide. According to the baseline scenario, we see that we'll have a moderate growth of the number of data users from 640,000 something to 720,000 something, and with a penetration rate of 7.1%. So there is an increase to the 6.3% that we've indicated in 2014. Under the high growth scenario, clearly the numbers are going to be extremely more, definitely more positive. We'll have a number of data users that will be more than double. So we are in the range of 1.3 million data users, and also the penetration rate will increase substantially. On the other hand, in the challenge scenario, the number of data users will remain almost the same, and so will the penetration rate, which will grow only very, very marginally from 6.3 to 6.5%. So I am basically finished with my presentation. Just the final considerations to summarize what we have said so far. The penetration and the overall number, and therefore the penetrations of data users in Europe is 6.3%. It was set in 2014. It's still relatively low, so there is room for definite improvement in the coming years. The population of data users is definitely less concentrated than the populations of data suppliers companies, and we have seen this because the sectors of the economies where users are to be found is clearly larger than the sectors of the economy where data suppliers are to be found. Data user companies are distributed across all the main industries with relatively low concentrations. Obviously, ICT, finance, and utilities are leaders in this respect because the data users' penetrations is directly related to ICT spending and ICT penetration. The industries with a high ICT spending intensity clearly are leading in this respect. And then a final note on the forecast. So with the penetration rates and the forecast that we have highlighted in our first measurements of the monitoring tool, clearly the high growth scenarios is the best scenarios, and whereas the worst case scenario is the one which will not imply a big change in the penetration rate. With that, I have finished my introductory and my presentation.
Thank you, Giorgio. I actually have seen that there is one question regarding, could you just keep, okay, I'm gonna, can you keep your presentation on? I have just one question that I have seen, and I think we can ask this question right now. Let me find the question. The question is from Eva van Steenbergen. And I actually assigned the question to you, Giorgio, so you should be able to see it right now.
Wait a minute, just a second.
Because I cannot see it anymore. So basically, Eva asked about the survey itself. So maybe I can give voice to Eva and she can just ask the question because I cannot read it anymore.
I don't see the question from here. Mm-hmm.
Eva, can you ask the question directly?
Yeah, sure. My question was how many data users were included in the survey. Did you hear me?
Sorry, no, I can't.
One more time. How many data users were included in the survey?
The survey included approximately 1,500 data users, and I think I don't remember correctly now, but I think it's 200. I mean, it was clearly a higher number of data users and 200 something data suppliers. As I showed in the slides, or I tried to show in the slides, we had to take a decision when it comes to the definition of the sectors, or where to find the data users or where to find data companies. The big point here to be remembered is data users are by definition defined everywhere in the economy, whereas data suppliers had to be limited to two specific sectors, so the ICT and the business services sector. I don't know if this answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question right now. The question is from the audience. Is 6% good enough, in your opinion?
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. This is one of the messages that we're trying to convey also from the first interim report that we've been producing so far. Very just a summary and a cut of, in a sense, of the big pictures that you can find in the first interim report, which again is a first interim report, which we're going to have second measurements of these indicators in the coming years, and be published in March next year. So we'll see if in March this penetration rate will change, but definitely not. This is still low, but as we said in this presentation, this also means that we will have room for improvement over the next few coming years. Another interesting point that I've tried to highlight in the presentation is that what we saw by looking at the distribution of data users in Europe and with respect to the dynamics of ICT spending and the dynamics and distributions of the overall number of data of companies in Europe is that the number of data users is still more related and connected, correlated with the ICT spendings that the number of data of companies in general. So clearly we are expecting that data will be used also in sectors where ICT is less, less used, and we are seeing interesting cases and new cases in sectors like, for example, agriculture, where you would never think that ICT, and actually it's true, ICT spending, it's not high. ICT is not, does not have a high intensity in a sector like agriculture, but because data are becoming more and more used, then data technologies and innovations, data-driven innovations, can be reached in these more traditional sectors as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Giorgio. The last question, we have it from Dan Wu. Are governments included in the investigation as the data users?
Yes, data users, governments are included in these numbers, and also in the percentage. So in the unit number and in the penetration, so the four numbers that you see there.
Dan, does it answer your question? Okay, so let's move on. Now I'm going to give voice to our second keynote speaker, Juan. Could you share a screen with us? Thank you. We still see, yeah, we need a presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. So yeah, thanks a lot for being here, and also for the opportunity to present in this session about this important project that Giorgio has been describing. I'm just going to be talking a bit about some research we have been doing at Nesta which I think really complements what Giorgio was talking about. We have been looking at skills because we think that skills could be one of the factors whose absence might lead to a situation where we don't have the levels of growth in the data economy that we desire, and the levels of growth, the levels of innovation, and so forth. But I'm going to very quickly take you through, I guess, a presentation that shows you why we think this could be a problem, the data we have collected to evidence it, and also I'm going to briefly talk about some solutions in terms of implications for skills and educational policy. So let's get started. So I mean, the context is obviously something I don't need to convince you of. The fact that more online activity, digitization of processes, and better hardware are creating more varieties of data, larger volumes of data being produced at faster velocities. And this is generating all sorts of opportunities to innovate new applications in terms of data-driven products and services, automation, improved decision-making, and so on and so forth. Obviously, this data explosion is creating lots of opportunities to innovate, and this is the reason why we at Nesta, an innovation agency, are very interested in the data explosion and understanding what are the levels of adoption of data analytics and what are the barriers to bigger adoption of these innovative technologies and these innovative practices. So we have been doing research on this area for a while now. It's been a couple of years, and we have defined the whole program as trying to understand the data wars. When we say data wars, we mean those companies which are data-driven, are using new types of data, in innovative ways, and as a consequence are experiencing better performance. Yeah, so the first report that we carried out in this space was called Rise of the Data Wars. It was published in 2012. And actually what this report, based on a survey of UK businesses active online, I guess many of which would be part of the data suppliers definition that Giorgio referred to, we actually found that even in this market where you would expect to find high levels of activity of data-driven companies, of data wars, the data-driven companies were in fact in the minority. Only around 17% of the companies that we surveyed were using data to make decisions. By contrast, almost twice as many companies were using still experience and intuition to make decisions. We also have done some econometric research to estimate the link between higher levels of data activity and company performance. Our analysis reveals that the data active companies, the data boards, are more productive and more profitable even after we control for their sector, their size, their levels of reported levels of innovation, and so forth. So I guess when you put these two reports together, this creates a puzzle for us, which is, you know, if we are seeing that higher levels of data use has an impact on company performance, why are not more companies doing it? Why don't we find more data wars out there in the market? And we think that one of the potential answers to this question is the fact that companies are experiencing difficulties finding the type of talent that will allow them to become more data active and more data driven. This is the reason why we're hearing about the data talent crunch or skill shortages in the market for people with data skills. And this is what we have tried to evidence through our Skills of the Data Wars report, which I'm going to be talking a bit more about in the following slides. We haven't stopped at evidencing what the situation in the market is. We have also been developing some recommendations to address those issues. And these recommendations are presented in a policy briefing called Analytic Britain that we published in partnership with Universities UK. It's a trade body for UK universities. And although obviously this research and this report are focused on the UK situation, I think many of our findings and many of our lessons could be applicable elsewhere in Europe. But of course, I look forward to hear your views on that assumption I'm making. Very quickly, because yeah, we have a lot to go through. Obviously, creating value from data requires skills in different stages of the data value chain. This includes people with the right data collection and management skills. This includes people with data analysis skills to be able to extract information and knowledge from all of that data, and also people who have the skills to take that information, that knowledge, and apply it to create value. And this includes both people who are making better decisions, including managers and frontline workers, but it also includes developers who are using using, for example, algorithms coming out from the analysis of big data to develop new products and services, like, for example, recommendation engines in e-commerce sites and stuff like that. So the businesses that we have spoken to, and I must say that in addition to the surveys that we have done, we have also undertaken a significant number of qualitative interviews with businesses that are using data to innovate, and also businesses that are developing tools and technologies based on data. What this business tells us is that they are looking for talent, the famous data scientists who have a very interesting combination of skills, including computing skills, including analytical skills, domain knowledge and understanding of the industry, business skills and storytelling to be able to actually know what questions to answer, and also soft skills to work as part of teams. These people are proving very hard to find, a bit like unicorns, and this is the way they are referred to by many of the companies we speak to. And this is a finding that is consistent with other studies out there, like McKinsey's 2011 Big Data study. In the case of the UK, research by the Tech Partnership, evidencing big data skill shortages, as well as previous research by Nesta, like those qualitative interviews I mentioned. So, in Skills of the Data Boards, what we try to do is create more evidence about these skill shortages, and this survey is this report is based on a survey of 404 medium and large companies in the UK, operating in 6 sectors. These 6 sectors, let's see if I can remember them, include creative industries, ICT, finance, manufacturing, retail, pharmaceuticals. I think I got them all. And what we did with this in this examine the data activities of these companies, where the data is having an impact, and what was the skills angle for all of this. How were these companies accessing skills to use data? Where were they having problems finding those skills, and what were they doing about it? So actually the first thing we did is to segment companies depending on how they use their data. And the idea here is that people tend to assume that either there's 2 ways to behave in regards to data. Companies can either be big data and be using all of those wonderful technologies that Giorgio was talking about, like Hadoop and combining data in all sorts of ways, and using machine learning algorithms, and all of that in one extreme. And on the other extreme, there are companies who are not doing any of this. But actually, the reality is a bit more complex than that, in the sense that the data sources and data sizes which are available in different sectors are different. And as a consequence, we have tried to capture that complexity of the world by segmenting companies in our sample, using information about the type of technologies they use to process data, the data sources that they use, and how they use data to drive decisions. Actually, our research identifies 3 different types of data active companies, not just one. We find data boards, which are the companies that are the main feature that distinguishes them from the others is that they are extremely intensive users of data to make decisions. Almost all their decisions are based on data and analysis. We also find the data builders that are distinguished from the other companies in that they are with much larger data sets. They are very often using parallel processing of data. They have a more advanced data processing infrastructure. And then we find the data mixers, which are the companies which are actually not necessarily dealing with big data sets that require using big data technologies, but they're actually combining data coming from many different sources like social media, open data, customer data, internal data, and so forth. And yeah, these are about 70% of our sample. The other 30% of companies in our sample are the data folks, which are not really doing much with their data. And before you ask me why our findings are so different from what Giorgio was talking about in terms of 70% of companies who are working with data and 30% which aren't, the thing to consider here is that our sample was designed to capture companies that were at least doing some work with data. We wanted to capture information from those companies where data skills were at least likely to be needed and skill shortages might be being felt. So our survey is not representative of the broader economy in the way in which a lot of the analysis presented by Giorgio was. Our analysis is more representative of the leading edge of adopters of data practices, the types of companies that we want to support. Even in that, how would I say, theoretical sample of companies where data plays a role, we still find 30% of companies which are actually data phobes, in the sense that they are not using data to drive decisions, they are not working with big data technologies, and they are almost only using internal data. They are not using other types of data from the outside in a way that drives innovation. Our analysis of we have compared the performance of these companies with an econometric analysis. And what we find is that the data active companies, and particularly the data boards and the data builders, are significantly more productive than the data phobes, even after controlling for many other factors, including sector, including company age, including size, and so forth. And this is what this chart shows you. So I guess what this shows is that, yes, there's a value to creating value from data. These companies, we are finding a set of companies that are using their data in a way that drives innovation and growth. And then the question becomes, do these companies have access to the skills that they need to continue behaving in this data active way? Something else that I should quickly say, data active companies as well as data phobes aren't concentrated in a single industry. So you can see, and you can see the distribution here across the sectors we looked at. Maybe, as you could expect, more data builders in ICT, where there's more big data sets, more data boards in financial services, and maybe consistent with what Giorgio was talking about before, more data phobes that are making less use of data in retail and manufacturing. Okay, and yeah, I'm mindful of time, so I'm just going to be telling you a bit about the skill shortages, what's going on here. And what this chart shows is differences between the different types of companies in terms of their propensity to recruit data analysts in the 12 months before the survey. And as you see, the pink bars are representing some recruitment of analysts. The blue and the gray is no recruitment or doesn't know. And what you see clearly by comparing is that the data boards, the data builders, and the data mixers are all recruiting analysts at a much faster rate than the data phobes. When we ask them about what disciplines they recruit from, we find the data active companies more likely to say that they are recruiting people who have both, they're recruiting people both from analytical disciplines like maths and statistics, but also computer science disciplines. And also we find the data active companies much more likely to say that they are suffering skill shortages when they recruit this, when they look for this analytical talent. In terms of the main skills that data active companies are struggling to find, we find these companies very concerned about the industry knowledge of people in the analyst talent pool. There's very few people out there who actually understand their industry and how to use data to create value inside their industry. There are also many concerns about the mix of skills of data analysts in the talent pool. The companies that we surveyed and the companies we have spoken to tell us that it's very easy, it's relatively easy to find people who can do programming, and it's relatively easy to find people who can do the statistical analysis. What's hard to find is people who have that combination of skills that I was referring to before. And also, it's very difficult to find people who have experience, especially with some of the new emerging technology frameworks and big data technologies that are coming in the market. Around 1/3 of the data active companies report skill gaps in their analytics workforce. And in terms of training up, something that I wanted to flag up really quickly, but I think it's really interesting, is that the way in which the companies that we have surveyed are upskilling their workforce and building an analytics capability is not so much by using universities. They are doing a lot of training in-house, as you see in this bar chart. they are doing training externally, but very interestingly, there's lots of informal peer-based learning and lots of online learning, including participation in meetups and events, using massive open online courses and so forth, and also participation in online communities. And this is actually something that's consistent with our own experience in Nesta, where we have also been trying to build our own big data analytics capability, and we have been using all of these platforms to do this. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. I'm just going just by saying something about the implications for skills. And of course, you can, if you're interested in all of this, you know, we can have questions after. You can have a look at the analytic written report that you can find in Nesta's website. So what's clear to me is that if we don't ensure that businesses, also government and other organizations in Europe have access to people with these skills, it's very likely we'll find ourselves in the challenge scenario that Giorgio was describing before, because you know, we might have as much data as we want. If we don't have people with the skills to process that data, to analyze that data and use it, this data isn't going to have an impact. And basically what we have tried to do in Analytic Britain is really go through the whole pipeline of talent for data skills, including what happens in schools, what happens in universities, and also what happens in the labor market and in industry networking, in order to identify, set out a vision for the way things need to work, and also set out the specific recommendations about what needs to happen. And I'm not even going to get into this because I would spend another 15 minutes and we're running out of time. Yeah, as I said, you should be able to look at the report if you are more curious about this, and also consider, I guess, the extent to which our recommendations are applied to your own national context, which I think they will. And yeah, I think I have my email address at the end in case you want to follow up, and if you have any more questions about this research or the work we are doing now in this space. So there it is. Thank you very much for listening, and looking forward.
If you have any questions from the audience, and whether somebody can ask for the voice, but from what I've seen right now, we don't have any additional questions.